What's up, crew? Welcome back to Libertalia Game Supply. I had made a few videos a few weeks back when the structure deck came out about how I'd build it with 3 structure decks only, how I would build it if I had a limitless wallet, and just different stuff you could add to the structure decks to upgrade it. And I was asked about how specifically you would upgrade it if you were to go somewhere in the middle. So you didn't want to spend hundreds of dollars on this, which is perfectly reasonable. It's an expensive game. So this build right here, never mind this, we'll talk about this later, is just going to be based on having the 3 structure decks and then spending some extra cash. This build that you're looking at here, all in, would cost you somewhere around 70 to 80 bucks. I used the market prices on TCG Player, which are usually a little bit higher than what you could buy stuff for at the low. The only stuff in the deck that is not going to be from the structure deck are the Loop, the little Soupe package, the Ash Blossom, the Small Worlds, the Called By, and then the Tyrant, the Void Ogre, and the Quibelt. Now the deck pretty much just functions the same way it did when I made the other videos, so I'll link those down below if you want to check that out, and I won't spend too much time explaining it out because I'm sure everybody's seen their fair share of Red Dragon Archfiend stuff at this point. But as far as why I chose this in particular, I think this being like a 20-cent card is easily the first ad you make. The only reason the Soupe package is in here is because it gets you to that Red Rising Dragon, similarly to how the Bone Archfiend and the Soul Resonator would. Ideally, this would be more draw power. It's just the draw power that you would need for the deck is Prosperity. You could not play Extravagance because of how much of the extra deck you have to rely on to play your combos, so you need to be able to pick the stuff you'd be banishing at that point. And a play set of Prosperities would cost you about the same as it would cost you to build this deck 2.5 times, and so not reasonable for a video like this. So that is why this is in here. The Ash Blossom is just going to be one of your best hand traps. It's also fairly cheap. It's like 3.5 bucks. And then Small World is just one of my favorite cards in the game, especially if you're going to play a lot more non-meta decks that don't have their own in-archetype searching or draw power or whatever, or at least not up to the standard that you would want it to be. They're like 5 bucks a pop. I think they have a reprint coming in that rarity collection thing we're getting in maybe a month or so while I'm making this video. Now I'm not sure that it's getting like a rarity downgrade, like it'll be easier to get. I think it might actually be getting a rarity bump, so it won't be easier to get, but even still, it's only a $5 card, even at that, and it really fixes a lot of decks that use a lot of varying levels, attributes, types, anything like that. In this version of the deck, it can bridge you from any of your Dark Fiend tuners to any of your other Dark Fiend tuners just by using one of the fire monsters that we got in here. Speaking of which, I could see why you would cut the Red Resonator. I really love it just because it gives you access to that combo that is in the combo video that'll be linked down below that you can perfectly do fine in this deck. Because it's a level 2, it would allow you to summon these 2 to make your Supernova Dragon, and then you would get the search for the Red Dragon Archfiend Spell or Trap, which is any of these or either of these at this point. And that just does a lot for like setting up a board that you can pass over to your opponent and still have something you can use. And then the one Called by the Grave is just, it's pretty staple. Hand traps suck, they're going to mess you up bad, so you gotta play it. In the extra deck, the Quibelt is also like a 20-cent card. It's very, very cheap, so easy pickup there too. Void Ogre is also just another interesting one. It'd be pretty easy to empty your hand with this deck, and so being able to negate spells or traps while you throw this thing on board, even as just like an ancillary, like you just had extra material left over, and well, what do I make? Well, we'll make this, and I like it fine enough. And then the Tyrant Red Dragon Archfiend. This one is a little bit pricey. It's like 15 to 20 bucks. However, I did see when pulling up prices for this, there is a seller that has like 35, well 34 now because I grabbed one, Italian copies of this card for like 10 bucks. So the price total that I quoted you was assuming that you were going to have to buy a $15 to $20 copy of this card, but if you're willing to play with an Italian copy, you could get this whole thing for like 70 bucks or less, I would even say. So grab one of those if you're interested in that at all. And then all this stuff down here is just other stuff that I would recommend picking up. If you wanted to just play the deck straight and narrow, don't play any additional engines or anything, you're probably going to want to load up on a bunch of hand traps and such. And actually a version of Red Dragon Archfiend topped the tournament recently. I'll throw that deck list up if you're interested in that. I did not build it. I did not top with it. All credit to the guy that is out there doing his thing. And as you can see in that build, a lot of it is hand trap heavy, and I think that's the way to go. And so these cards, and I'll throw prices up so you can get an idea, would be really great additions. It's just if you were to add all 15 of these, you're probably looking at something in like an additional 60 bucks or so just for this stuff. which is starting to get pretty expensive, and once again, not really the point of this video. Now, my initial thought process when trying to build a cheaper version of this deck was using the Assault Mode engine in the deck that you get in the Structure deck. The problem with that is Red Dragon Archfiend Assault Mode is not a very good card in the context of this deck, just because you have so many board wipes already, and so I wanted to play the Stardust Dragon Assault Mode. The only issue there is you would need to leave a Stardust Dragon on board when you pass turn so that you can Assault Mode activate into the Stardust Dragon Assault Mode, and then you get that negate effect that can recur itself every turn, which I just thought was a really cool little gimmick there. However, Stardust Dragon is a wind monster, and as soon as you use Red Rising Dragon, you can no longer summon anything but Dark Synchro monsters, and you really cannot sacrifice your Red Rising Dragon plays. It is the heart and soul of the extra deck. It's what gets your deck really rolling, and so we just couldn't do that. However, I did get carried away with the idea, and I ended up building a different version of this deck. It is a Bysteel Assault Mode Red Dragon Archfiend deck, and I'll post that video at the same time this video is going up if you want to take a look at that too, just out of curiosity. I will say though, that is by far not a budget deck. That is going to be very expensive to build just because of how many expensive cards it takes for it to work the way I wanted it to work. But nevertheless, if you're interested, check it out. I would appreciate it. So that video will be up at the same time as this one. It's already live if you're watching this right now. Happy deck building. Pick up one of those cheap Tyrant Red Dragon Archfiends while you can. I don't know how quickly those are going to sell, but it's by far the best price I've seen. Have a good one. I'll see you in the other one. Goodbye.